Welcome, everybody. If we could call this meeting to order, if we could please start with a moment of silence for prayer or reflection. Thank you.
So firstly, we have adoption of the agenda.
Any additions? All right, seeing none, we'll adopt the agenda.
Next, we have adoption of the minutes from our last council meeting on February 6, on page 7, item 2.1.
Any errors, omissions? All right, seeing none.
Okay, moving right along to our presentation tonight. So we have Major Paul Mast and Major Scott Payne here to speak about Project 175, World War I Monument. I believe that Councillor Friesen will say a few words before. This is page 25 of your packets, item 4.2.
Thank you, Mayor Clugston, members of council, presenters, those of you in the gallery. Again, thank you for coming. It's so nice to look up there and see you in your in uniform, and it makes me really proud. So anyway, these gentlemen will tell you what you're going to hear is a very, very good news story, and it came through Public Services first. Prior to coming here to council, and we really wanted everyone to hear about this, not the limited audience in Public Services. And this is a really good news story, so without further ado, I will make a motion to adopt after the presentation is complete. But gentlemen, please go ahead and tell us about your project.
Welcome, gentlemen. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship, councillors, citizens, and I'd like to thank the USI Mafia for coming out tonight for their support. So the handsome devil back here, that's Major Paul Mast, so he's going to answer some of your questions tonight, as I will as well. So we're here to speak about a monument that the Royal United Services Institute of Medicine Hat would like to create and donate to the city. Obviously be on city land, so we're here for that purpose tonight. So we'll, without further ado, we'll speak about that. So again, thank you for having us here tonight. The monument, as you know, it's 2017. It's 100 years since the Battle of Vimy Ridge this April. It's also going to be 100th anniversary of the Battle of Passchendaele, where a local Medicine Hat soldier, Private James Peter Robertson, was killed on November 6, 1917. And I'd like to recognize Mrs. Tabay and Mrs. Delalonga, a couple of descendants of Private Robertson who are here tonight. So the monument, it's a perfect time for it. It's 100 years on from Vimy and Passchendaele. It's also the 100th and 50th anniversary of Confederation. So additionally, the Robertson Memorial Branch of the Royal Canadian Legion, just a few hundred meters that way, it's their 90th anniversary, and obviously named after Private Robertson. There's a lot of history in Medicine Hat, and a great part of that history is the military history. The South Alberta Light Horse is the local reserve regiment, goes back to 1885. And there are a couple of units from Medicine Hat area from World War I that the South Alberta Light Horse perpetuates, the 3rd Canadian Mounted Rifles and the 175th Battalion, the Medicine Hat Battalion. There's also another tie to that. The commander of the 3rd Canadian Mounted Rifles was Colonel F.O. Sissons, a family that's got a strong history in Medicine Hat. And the South Alberta Pipes and Drums, a local, fantastic band, and I'm sure everybody here has had the pleasure of hearing them in concert. Their soldiers, their members of the band going back 100 plus years actually joined the 113th Battalion, the Lethbridge Highlanders, and they went overseas and they fought with the the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada. The 113th Battalion, as you'll see shortly, is recognized on a monument in Calgary. So what the United Services Institute is offering is to construct the monument and to pay for the monument. We understand that sometimes the city gets gifts, and sometimes those gifts wind up costing the citizens. And that's what we want to try and avoid. We want to pay for certain things like utilities up front, We want to pay for maintenance like the grass trimming. And we want to essentially make this our baby to take care of going forward. So a gift to the city and one that we will continue to do. So what we'd like to do as well is provide a deposit. We had some really good feedback from the Parks Department that should the Institute eventually dissolve someday, that they want to have some funding if they were to ever have to tear down the monument. We don't think that will ever happen. As you'll see, the monument you see there is Battalion Park at Signal Hill in Calgary. And that's been there for over 100 years, specifically the 113th Battalion up at the top left corner. So we expect that that monument that we're trying to construct, which will be very similar in design, will last 100 plus years. And we expect that the Royal United Services Institute will be around for a long time. It's made up of mostly members and former members of the military. And we obviously have a regiment here. We have British Army Training Unit Suffield, as well as Canadian Forces Base Suffield. So we have a lot of organizations that can feed into our institute, but we take anybody who supports the military. So we expect to be around for a long time. So the design that we've come upon, and we are obviously open to other opinions from council for sure, would be the 3rd Canadian Mounted Rifles. So the abbreviation would be 3CMR in a slight arch over 175, which is the 175th Medicine Hat Battalion. But we would like to add on the left side a maple leaf, stylized very similar to what they would have used in World War I for their cap badges. And then to the right, pending approval from Dominion Command of the Royal Canadian Legion, a poppy. If we don't get that approval, we would probably go with a second leaf, or we could go with a non-Legion stylized poppy. So, and we'd be happy to hear from Parks as well as the City Council if that doesn't get approved to change that design. So we've done some preliminary studies and work on it. The monument we see as being beside Highway 1, just below Samus Drive. So it'd be right beside the overpass of 3rd Street, I believe it is. And it's very close to a walkway that's along Samus Drive. So what we'd like to do is put signage up there and install a bench and make it a nice landmark. And we see that place possibly being used as a ceremonial spot once a year on the anniversary of Private Robertson's death at Passchendaele on November 6th, 1917. As you can see, it will be a fairly large monument. We see it being a little over 100 feet high and about 140 feet wide, each letter being roughly 40 feet high, and the poppy and leaf being about 30 feet high as well. Everything is scalable, and we'd be happy to hear from Parks to make sure that we fit the dimensions that they recommend. We will have lighting installed, and we're prepared to pay up in advance on a guaranteed rate for utilities. So it will be seen very well throughout the city. You can see that part of the river valley from the side, from the south side of the city, pretty much straight across the city. Everybody's familiar with the Canadian flag. This will be, I believe, about 3 or 4 times the size of the Canadian flag. So the Royal United Services Institute is one of the things that we do is we try and educate the community about the military, and we certainly support the military, and we see this as a great opportunity. So the signage that we would have at the park, by the park bench on the walkway would have the quick response codes, those new barcodes that your phones can click into, and it'll direct it to our website. And then our website will talk about 3rd Canadian Mounted Rifles, 175th Battalion, and the citizens of Medicine Hat, what they contributed to the war effort. And it will link, obviously, to the Esplanade Museum, as well as other museums like South Alberta Light Horse Regimental Association, Galt, and Glenbow as well. So that will help with the education aspect. And I think there's something like 16,000 cars that go by it every day. So that will really spread the word. And we see it as a good opportunity, just another great thing to add to the city. It won't be a park, but I see it as just another great thing that parks can be very proud of. So you can see here, just below the condos on Samus Drive and just above the ones on the 3rd Street Northwest. So just less than a kilometer away from the South Saskatchewan River. So we've already spoken about some of the reasons why for the monument. 2017 is really the year to do it. We could do it in 2018 as well, but we've already raised either in donations or pledges about $14,000, and that's just been our soft, quiet fundraising, and we're prepared to, if the city adopts the motion, to go with public fundraising. So the basic cost of the monument will, to start, would be $50,000. We have applied for and received a grant that we may or may not use for the poppy and the leaf. And we have some quiet private offers for assistance, and we expect that when we do get approval to proceed, that a statement of work and a call for bids, we expect the prices to go down. We've done high cost estimates, and we believe we have a lot of room in the budget. So we're very confident that we will proceed with this summer with the approval of the city. So what we're asking of you, and we're trying not to ask for too much, is we'd like you to consider naming the monument after Private Robertson in some fashion. We don't want to call it a park because it's not going to be a park unless, of course, the city makes it a park. But we would like it to be something along the lines of Private Robertson, BC, so the Victoria Cross, which he was awarded, Hill, or Robertson Hill. There's already a Robertson Park in Medicine Hat, and so we think this would be a great opportunity to recognize him as well. Ideally, we can certainly afford to pay for the development fees and permits, but if the city would be willing to waive those, that just helps us do more things and perhaps improve signage or increase lighting or even just pay for lighting going further in the future. We would like to have a dedication ceremony on September the 10th. It lines up really well, specifically on the South Alberta Light Horse Regimental Association side. There's a change of command on the 9th, the Saturday, and on the 10th, the Regimental Association would be invited, and they have some guests coming from Belgium and from the Netherlands and possibly others. So it would be a great opportunity to link them to the city and help them to get to know the city a little bit better and be part of something here. And then, upon turnover of the monument, what we would like to do is have the city own the monument. We will accept paying for the utilities and maintenance, and we're prepared to fund long-term major maintenance, and we've already planned our spring barbecues every year so that we'll go out there with our wire cutters and make sure that we tie everything down and fix any winter repairs. But the Institute, in order to get to this point, did not want to take on ownership or leasing of the land, simply because we'd have to get insurance for the directors and the members, and it becomes an additional cost. And it's already hard enough to get people to certainly run for council, right? But as you can imagine, for nonprofit service groups, you have to twist the rubber arms all the time. So that's what we would like from you, if the city can do that. So I'm open for any questions, and Paul Mass will come up as well.
Thank you very much, Major Payne. Any questions or comments of our presenters? Councillor McIntosh?
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Payne, I guess my question is, as you guys go ahead with the development up there on that hill, and you're seeing 16,000 vehicles drive by every day, there's going to be a lot of intrigue in the community. Do you have a plan right now for how you're going to educate people over the next couple of months, should this project go ahead, just in terms of what's happening up there?
Well, certainly, we'd start with a public affairs program, and actually, I forgot to do our websites. We've got a couple of websites and links started right now. And what we plan to do for the construction is make it a real community project. So back in 1914 and 15, when Battalion Park was built on Signal Hill in Calgary, it was the units that trained there that built the monument. And what we want to do is obviously we're going to invite the South Alberta Light Horse, the British Army Training Unit Suffield, CFB Suffield. We've already talked to the Cadet Corps as well. And we're going to talk to other service groups. But what we want to do is over a 3-week period in the summer is to invite other service groups as well as individuals, citizens, to help lay the stones. It won't be a very difficult project, but there will be a little bit of sweat equity put in by everybody. And certainly in the military, we do a lot of public affairs, so we will have a very robust public affairs plan. And we will definitely roll it out more than just websites. Unfortunately, schools are out in the summer, so it's hard to get school participation at that time. But we will definitely invite schools as well as other groups to the opening ceremony if the city agrees to that date.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Worship. Scott, this is the second time I heard the presentation, and each time I'm just a little bit more awestruck by this. It isn't often that we get a request like this that doesn't involve any city money and is so well prepared. You've considered so many things in the presentation, and I commend you for that, and your group. I love the fact that this is going to bring the history of our city alive. In World War I, our city recruited almost just about every man in the city for the regiment. And for those of you who have walked through the tunnel from the parkade to the elevators at the Esplanade, the pictures were up of the regiment there, and you get a sense of the awesome number of soldiers that were there. I have a special interest in one particular family I've been working on Meowsin and the Saratoga Park project, and the Bliss family contributed 4 sons to that war, and 2 of them came back alive, and one of them was definitely shell-shocked, and the effect of that war had a lasting impact on our community, and we can be very proud of the heritage that it's left us. And so I commend your group, and I commend you for the initiative that you've shown in putting this thing together, and I sincerely hope it will be a project that we're all going to be delighted to support. I particularly like the fact that you want to include the cadets in this particular program. I think that helping those young people understand the meaning and the sacrifice involved in the regiment is something that will be deeply ingrained and leave a lasting impression. So congratulations and thank you for doing this. It's a nice matchup for other beautification projects along the highway, including the Daffodil Project that Gillian Slade has authored. So congratulations again, and all the best to you and your regiment.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well said. Councillor Dumanowski.
Your Worship, to Major Payne and Major Mast, and the group up there, thank you for coming today and presenting this. The first time I've seen it. As has been already communicated, well thought out, lots of passion behind what you're trying to achieve here. The storyline melts everyone's hearts. This is a good news story. When I attended university in Calgary, I lived near Signal Hill, and there wasn't a day I'd go by it without looking at it, even for a moment, literally every day, because it's just hard to not look at. And I hope this becomes the same kind of thing for the citizens of Medicine Hat and people who are traveling by or walking by, and it becomes a living memorial for those who served past and present. So I applaud you wholeheartedly. I endorse it. And I guess my question, a small one, is where you're placing it. I could see where and why, but when I first heard about this, I thought it was going to be closer to the flag. Is there a reason why you picked that particular spot, or did Parks direct us there, just out of curiosity?
Well, one of our members actually dealt with Parks, and there were a couple of sites that they looked at in the valley by the TP in King Cooley.
Right.
Obviously, there's erosion issues there.
Yeah.
And we are open to other alternate sites. It's the city's land, and we'd be happy to put it where the city thinks it would go best. Basically, that land there, we saw, it looks like it's already been disturbed for the overpass there. So we didn't see any significant environmental concerns about undisturbed land. And just the sight lines, obviously, there's going to be lamp posts, so at different times, it's going to be a whisker in front of your face. But there's so many sight lines, it's seen from the south side of the river in so many locations. But certainly, if the city would come back with an alternate location, you know, we're not tied to it.
And just to follow, I'm not proposing we do that. I think the spot works as long as you think, just for whatever reason, I thought it was going to be closer to that Canada flag. So perhaps there's even greater usefulness in having them separated. But I'm encouraged that Parks has worked with you, and I'm hopeful that staff can work with you on our behalf to make sure that we see this project come to fruition. So congratulations on everything you've done so far, and looking forward to being at that ceremony.
Well, thank you. And another point was the walkway being there, already constructed. So it does lend to the education side. And certainly I would like to thank Mr. Sharp and all of the staff at Parks who've given us some great insight in this presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Friesen.
Well, first of all, I'm going to make a motion that we move the adoption of this item forward from Public Services to right now, since everyone is here listening. It makes good sense. And then I'll speak to it.
Can we get a motion?
I second.
Sorry, can we get a motion for reception first, and then we'll move it up?
Okay, I'll move reception first.
Second.
Okay, now I'll move it, be moved from Public Services ahead to right now.
Well, let's vote on reception.
Yeah. I forgot. Got all excited.
That was unanimous, thank you. So I don't think there's any other questions of our presenters. Right, thank you so much. I think it was about 6 months ago that you approached me with this idea, and I don't know if you think the process has gone quickly, but it has, believe it or not. And I'm so glad that you're here tonight, that we're finally here with this
And we
project.
appreciate your support, sir, and certainly your wisdom. We did mention the Parks wisdom, but you had some really profound thoughts that helped encourage us to carry on with it. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. I'm just glad we're here, so thanks. So now, if we want to talk about the adoption, getting a motion for adoption.
Yeah, sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. So I will move adoption, and I would just like to briefly speak to it. I didn't speak when we were asking questions, but just some closing remarks.
Can I get a seconder?
Second.
So anybody else, or Councillor Friesen?
Okay, well, I echo certainly what's been said, and I thank you to both of you, Major retired and current Major, and again, those of you in the gallery for being here. I have to say, when we had this in Public Services, I thought to myself, wow, I can't ever remember one time. There's been wonderful projects in this city over the years, wonderful projects. I can't even remember one time when a group came to us and said, not only will we pay for this thing we want to do, but we will we'll pay for it. We will do all the work. We will pay for the utilities and the maintenance, but we'll pay for it up front, and we will set up a trust so that if something happens to our organization, we're still going to make sure it's taken care of. Like, I just am so taken with this, not to take away from the value of it, but to recognize the fact of your commitment and your dedication and how strongly you feel about this, that you're willing to do all of those things to make sure this is there in perpetuity and respected while still gifting it to the city. So I really, really thank you for that. Both my father and my grandfather served in the wars, and there are a lot of tremendous contributions that went on that so many people don't know about, and this will really help through your education campaign and through just by the sheer visual presence of it, make people more aware of those contributions that lest we forget. So I'm really proud to say that I'm going to support this. I urge council to support it. It's a little unusual this way because we're asking for adoption of the item tonight. That will then generate a bylaw being prepared, and then this council will still have to carry the bylaw. But once we choose to, no, we're okay?
Just an agreement.
Just an agreement? Okay, we'll have the agreement, then we won't even need a bylaw. All right, so then that way the group will be able to go ahead and start their fundraising because your timelines are a little bit tight, and so I certainly recognize that. And then you're able to work along with the Parks Department to ensure your site. By the way, the Parks Department has no problem with the site and is really proud to have been working with you. That's the other thing. we don't have that many groups that get along so well with us. So, so it's really nice. I don't mean the fighting goes on, but I mean, you know, there's usually things that you have to work on, to agree on. And in this case, the relationship, it has been so mutually beneficial. And so we really appreciate that. So anyway, I could go on, but I'm quite proud of this one, and I'd urge all of you to support it.
Thank you. Any other comments on the adoption? Councillor Pearson?
Just to back up what you said, Councillor Friesen, I think I've already said it to this group, but it's so nice to have a gallery when people aren't mad at us.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, if we could to vote. And that was unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to reports. Our first report's on page 11, item 4.1, Development and Infrastructure Committee meeting February the 8th. And this report's for adoption and information.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Councillor Cox?
My question relates to, is there a point by which this development must occur? We used to have that policy whenever we sold land, that it had to be, development had to be commenced within 1 year. That was usually a term of the agreement for sale. And a year or two, whatever. But there
Well,
was always
commercial construction is 2 years, I think.
there was always that requirement. Is that going to be here? I mean, normally, we don't sell land on speculation. It's for development, or we'll hang on to it ourselves. Thank you very much. So what's the score here?
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Cox, I think I'll have to defer that one to Commissioner Schwarzenberger. I know there's quite a long period of due diligence here in order to find out exactly what's required to develop the land, because it is before closing even, they need to spend quite a bit of time in due diligence. That's correct. That's correct. I'll defer that to the Commissioner.
Through the chair, I don't believe there actually is at this point a building commitment. The applicants or the proponent's intention is to build eventually, but with the market conditions right now, he's saying that there likely isn't a market in the next few months.
Well, on that basis, I'm not prepared to support the sale.
Okay, so I'm going to go back, though. So it is commercial land. I'm pretty sure that once the deal closes, he has 2 years to commence construction. As you said, we don't allow speculation on land.
Well, that's our term if we put it in the contract, but if we don't put it in the contract.
It's actually part of all of our commercial sales.
Well, I see the city solicitor shaking his head, so.
Through the chair, in this particular case, while it's often the city has a buyback option, there may be a commencement construction requirement. It's not in all cases. In this particular case, the determination was made that it was not necessary, that we're prepared to sell them on the spaces and they can develop at their own timeline. So it's not a term of this particular contract.
Well, if I may, Your Worship, then I will speak against the decision.
Okay.
I don't think we're that desperate for the cash that we want to sell the land without a guarantee that the development as proposed is going to go ahead. There's already some controversy about what should go on this site. I was prepared to support it if the developer was prepared to build it. But if he's just saying, I think it looks good for this purpose, and when we see the economy pick up, we might just build it. In the meantime, the land sits and it's sterilized from further development, and I will not support it on that basis.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dymanowski?
Well, Councillor Cox brings up a good point. However, when I look at the history of this parcel land, it's been on the market for some time. Hasn't really taken much interest except for this offer, and this offer meets or exceeds our purchase price. I think the point of significant due diligence has been brought up. I brought up a similar kind of question at committee level about why so long, or there's just a deposit, and then when do we see a significant deposit made to secure the land rather than just kind of hold it and test the waters. And part of that had to do with the fact that it's an unusual parcel, and we're not sure what kind of engineering or utility tie-in is going to be required and what's available, et cetera. It could be pretty significant. I think we're going to know that the proposed purchaser is going to know whether they're ready to make that kind of investment either now or in the future quite quickly. If anything, we ought to believe, I believe, and I would be hopeful that they are prepared to do it, because I think there's going to be significant costs in order to get that kind of utility tie-in into that area. So if they're prepared to spend that money over and above what they've already done and then build something, that would bode well for us and for the community, quite frankly. So when I think about other parcels of land, we know some of them. One of them is across the street from us. It was held, and then there were extensions made, and then it was given back, and then we've done that number of times on different properties in our community, always hoping that the proposed developer can make good on it. And sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't. So I know we're going back to the question of whether there's a timeline, and it sounds like there isn't here. But I'm willing to look beyond that in this particular unique case because of some of the unique things related to this property. And I think there's going to be pretty significant investment need to be made in this property if they're going to move ahead. So I can waive that piece for this particular property in that regard. So I will be supporting it, and I would like to see us move ahead. Just very quickly about whether we're desperate or not, and I know you mean that in a relative sense. If we can sell land and we have somebody's willing to pay the price for that land, and they know there are going to be significant hurdles, probably just looking at it before they even put a deposit down, I think we need to do our best to support their motivations to develop something there, and ultimately whatever they do is going to benefit the community, like I said, from the standpoint, even if it's a hotel or a service station or something, because it adds to our community. And from what I hear, we need more hotels, as I've heard from other developers. So I won't repeat myself. I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also will be supporting this, and I guess the one thing we should consider, and it's probably not going to amount to a lot of money, but when this piece of land changes from city hands to private hands, it also becomes a taxable piece of property, and we will be collecting taxes on it. I'm not sure what the assessment will be, but it'll be, if it's $1, it's $1 more than we're getting right now.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Worship. I agree with everything that's been said in support of this particular motion, and I would just add a little information tidbit I picked up from the Destination Marketing Organization. Outside of the Banff-Jasper-Canmore corridor, occupancy rates in Medicine Hat are the highest in the province. That's probably the best incentive I can think of for building another hotel in a very prominent place and making it a kind of landmark facility. So I think it's something that we won't have to wait too long before before it becomes a reality.
Thank you. Councillor Friesen.
Well, thank you. A lot of it's been said, but you know what? I had some questions at committee myself. This is one of those interesting ones where the sale of a property precedes, and rightfully so, the development of a property. And so you can't tie one to the other necessarily. But in selling it, you're not quite sure what will be on there in the meantime. And, you know, I'm a little concerned that and this shouldn't hold up the sale, but I'm just sharing my concerns, that there's some real strong heritage land there, there's the teepee there, and the tourist site, yes, but it makes it a good place to have a hotel or whatever. But it also could impinge, if you will, on the sightlines of the teepee. It could have an impact on some of those things in a positive or a negative way. And we don't know that when we're selling the land. So part of me thinks I need to know more about it first, and part of me recognizes that the system, the way it is, has to go in a certain flow, and you can't be selling property based on development only. So I'm going to have to trust the development process, if it gets to that point, in ensuring that sight lines and other cultural pieces of our heritage are also taken care of in the development. So I know it's not really in order to say those things right now, but I think it's important that we share some of our concerns about why we make our decisions. So I've kind of vacillated around this one. I want to see us sell it. I think we need another hotel. It would be good for economic development and tourism. Is it the ideal site? Do I have concerns about it? Yes, I do. So I'm going to support it, but I am going to say that I have some reluctance because I'm hoping that our development process, should it get to that, in an appropriate amount of time, takes care of those considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The mitigating factor for me is that Miyasan is considering building their new Friendship Center, their new facility, their head office, up right next to the teepee. And that, to me, means that that site is preserved as a cultural heritage site. And I like the fact that there's development going on the hill. I think that's not a bad thing. It's something that means that tourists are drawn off the road and there's attractions there for them, and especially in the long term.
Thank you. Councillor Dumanowski.
Just one thing that either Councillor Turner or Pearson made me recall, I wanted to say earlier, is that I would imagine once you invest money on a piece of land, you're not going to hold it forever, because it's not like there's going to be an upside to holding it a long term. They're going to want to develop to get return on their investment. So to me is an indication that they're serious about doing the development sooner than later. Plus, with construction costs being more favorable, I think that's likely to happen. My other comment was the sightlines. I did it when we had the proposed radio tower or TELUS tower, I can't remember which one was being proposed, and I looked again both ways as I frequent that highway where this parcel land is, and in no way, shape, or form did it obscure the sightlines of the teepee at all. So I'm satisfied wholeheartedly. It doesn't even come close to obscuring the sightlines. So I think, again, it's a good opportunity, and I'm hopeful we can give this gentleman and his company an opportunity to develop there.
Thanks. Councillor Cox.
Well, I'll just reiterate my opposition. I do have concerns if this is an appropriate use. You say you've assured yourself that the sight lines won't be obstructed. I don't have confidence in your drive past, quite frankly. I think the time, Councillor Friesen, to ask these questions is now, before we sell the land, and not 2 months from now after it's changed hands and we don't have any more control. So for those reasons alone, I'm opposed to it. But I'm primarily opposed to it on the basis that it is land speculation. And the City of Medicine Hat has always adopted a policy where we don't sell land for speculation. If there is such a demand for hotels and such a pressing need to develop this property, then what's wrong with building the usual, thou shalt develop this within a year, 2 years, you'll commence development of closing. Why would that not be a requirement in this case? So for both of those reasons, I'm opposed.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, first of all, I would like to applaud the proposed developer. I see this as an ideal opportunity to put in a hotel in an area of our community that obviously is very different than the usual location where hotels are being built, in and around the mall and in and around Home Depot, et cetera. This is an area where if we get a hotel in there, this is a true tourism area. And that goes to highlight different aspects of our community that we need to be highlighting. So I, without question, will be supporting this. And again, I appreciate the thinking outside the box for some new ideas.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, if we could vote on this report. And that was 6 and 7 in favor, 1 against. It passes.
Our next report is item 4.2 on page 17, the Energy and Utilities Committee meeting minutes of February the 9th. This report's for information.
And I would move the report for that purpose.
Second.
Any comments? Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Worship. Well, these improvements are going to benefit both Medicine Hat and the surrounding areas. They come at a substantial cost, and both projects are funded long-term through rate increases equal to all customers of the electric utility, both in the city and in surrounding areas. I know in the past that was a cause for concern from previous councils. And I've heard two different opinions about when we tried to increase rates outside the city limits, we were taken to court, and I'm not too sure exactly what happened there. It seems like we have differing opinions, if you'd listen to Councillor Cox or to our CAO. Bottom line is we charge the same, and the fact that we are producing more power provides power to all of those areas around us, including Desert Bloom, Dunmore, and all those other areas like Redcliffe. So my question is this. Do we take electric consumer growth in surrounding areas into consideration as we plan for expanded power generation? Are we influenced by consumers on the fringe of the city like Desert Bloom? Is that something that we consider a lot? And if so, is there any expansion expense that devolves to the taxpayers of the city of Medicine Hat other than through utility rates? Are we paying any other additional costs? Line services, electric distribution, are those costs to us, or are they covered exclusively by utility rates?
The simple answer is they are covered by utility rates, and we do factor and hope for growth, frankly, and have already seen some major growth just on our boundary with the new greenhouse, and they're paying for their generation and the transmission.
And there's an assurance, Your Worship, that not an extra cent comes from the city taxpayer over and above the utility rate.
No.
I think that's really important for us to understand.
For sure, yeah. Thank you. Councillor Dominowski?
Well, just to the point of contention in the past that we were allegedly attempting to charge more. I don't recall that ever happening. I think when we were challenged to the utility, I can't remember the name of the utility board, it had to do with the perceived benefit that we had from a distribution standpoint, in which they were arguing was being levied perhaps unfairly to every other utility user outside of the limits. I think there was something to that regard, but it had nothing to do with charging more for the actual commodity and rate-wise. We're in fact bound to charge the same amount. So I just wanted to make that clear. Not that you were attempting to create a different view around that, but I know it had nothing to do with the actual commodity charge.
You're absolutely correct. We were charging the exact same price for the commodity. Where we were challenged was that our citizens received a dividend from the profits of that commodity, which was, of course, not shared outside the community because, frankly, we are the owners and are very deserved of any profits. And of course, our citizens also share in the losses as well.
That's correct.
So that was
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah. Councillor Varga?
Through the chair, I think there's a good news story here too when you see on item number 2 where it's going to come in $10.3 million under budget. I mean, that's quite substantial to the 66 million, so that means we might be able to use that money somewhere else down the road for something that we need. So I think that's a good news story, that because of the economy the way it is and through contractors and the reduction in prices, I think it's great to see that, because that's a lot of money. $10 million is a lot of money, so it's a good news story.
It's fantastic news. Thank you. Councillor Cox?
Well, just to reiterate, it is a good news story, but the story isn't over yet. So we anticipate $10 million coming in under the approved budget, which is pretty significant. That's, what is it? It's a seventh, better than a seventh of the whole budget. So, but there are contingencies that can arise. We expect this will happen. So yes, definitely a good news story.
Any other comments?
Oh, just wanted to reiterate, just in answer to Councillor Pearson, utilities, our electric distribution generation has always been run as a standalone business option. I don't think there's ever been a time when the taxpayer has had to subsidize the utility. I'll stand corrected if I'm in error here, but the electric utility stands or falls on its own, and if it experiences losses, it recovers those through the electric rates, not through the tax base. And I don't think there's ever been a time in memory that that has not been the case.
Councillor Pearson again.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, I'm just addressing what I've heard as a concern from others, that the taxpayer is paying for these projects. And just the clarification, I think, is really important for us to be very clear to our residents. It isn't your dollar anything more than what you're paying for your utility rate. However, there is some other reassurance I need here, and that is the distribution rate different outside of the city areas as compared to the inside city rates? They're the same, or are they differentiated?
They are the same.
They're
I
the same.
believe.
So everybody pays the same?
Everybody pays the same.
That's perfect.
And-
It's
and-
good for public education to know that.
The ratepayer and the taxpayer are often the same person.
I
But they're
understand.
paying out of different pockets.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Dumanowski.
We're going down memory road tonight. I think perhaps where that question maybe arises, Councillor Pearson, I'm thinking is when we've had to do capital expansions or developments, whether we choose to use MSI funds or not, because those are funds that are given to us, but we have always taken the process or the belief that if we put those funds towards our capital uses, then the utility will support the other one, so that it's spread amongst all users, and that way we're not using our MSI funds to the benefit, I guess, of not only our own citizens, but those around us. So it sounds a little bit mean-spirited, but we want the money to stay in our own community, and so that's why we put those funds towards our own capital projects. So that's maybe where that question came up, I suspect. That's my question.
Thank you for that further clarification.
Any other comments? Okay, if we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Moving on to page 25, item 4.3, Public Services Committee meeting of February the 13th, and this report's for adoption and information.
I'll move adoption of items 1 and information on 3 because we've already dealt with 2.
Yes.
Second?
Any comments, questions? Councillor Varga.
Through the chair to Councillor Friesen, you know I'm always going to have a question towards you on funding. I guess by myself doing that sometimes with some of the groups that I've been involved with, the point that always bothered me was the money that's given out halfway, like at the start. It's only half the money, right? I'm looking at some of the projects here, and some will make money because they're going to do other fundraising in order to try and get that done. So that's probably calculated into their final balance sheet, I would imagine. So they would never see that extra money coming to them, right? I would imagine. So I'm a little concerned about that because they could use the money right at the start, and it's not very much money. So when I look at it and I see that only $450 goes to a certain project, and because they might raise some extra funds along the way to do that, they might not get the other $450. So I think that, I don't know if we can, to me, I'd change it. I'd give them the money. It would be a one-time thing. It's done. It's not, to me, it's not a whole bunch of money. It's for a good cause. And then they don't have to worry about making sure that they have their books in line at the end of a project. That's probably the last thing on their mind once they go through this, right? But in this case, they have to always have their books in perfect order in order to try and get that extra money to them at the end. So to me, it's a concern, I guess, because of the paperwork that's involved, and it would just be easier for them to get the money in the end. If it was $15,000, I could see it then, right? That it would be a big amount of money. They'd only get $7,500, but when you're only dealing with $900 and $1,500, to me, that's pretty minor, but it's very important to the clubs that are asking for the money. I guess, to me, they're asking for it, they'd love to have it, and the ask is there, and I'd love to give it to them, right, rather than them only getting half of it. So I don't know if anything can be done down the road. I always question the way they do things in the culture and when they give out money, and I just hope that some of that is recognized in the future.
Yeah, I'm not sure how far to go in a response, and I know that you're very passionate about these grants, and I don't blame you. They're kind of the lifeblood of a lot of events and things that go on in our community. The ones you see tonight are the cultural grants. There are also sport and recreation grants as well through the other committee. And of course, FCSS is a whole other matter, usually with larger amounts of money. But I guess there are some common principles among all of them. And one of them is to, whatever the budget is, the total budget, is to maximize that amount of money to the largest extent you can. So to help as many groups as possible. So I don't really question what you say, but how would you cut off? How would you say, oh, if you're a group that's only asking for $400, it's okay, we won't ask you to do the paperwork. But if you're asking for $50,000, well, then we'll make you do the paperwork. I think it's about accountability despite the amount of money, because that accountability then allows others maybe to access the funds too, and it distributes to even more in the community. So just as a way of background for everyone else, if a group applies for $400, let's say, and they're given $400, they are granted $400, but the policy says if you end up raising the amount you need, or almost as much as you need, we give you half first. So we give you $200 first. And if you raise more than you thought you could, then you might not get the other $200, which frees up that $200 to then give to another group. And I know that's a bit of a nutshell, and I don't mean to be glib about it, but in essence, that's what it is. It's taking a small amount of money and trying to distribute it in as wide a swath as possible, while still keeping some record and accountability and transparency for the taxpayer to see where their money went and how many and who they supported along the path.
Thanks. Councillor Friesen, you're up next, or if that was your...
Well, I was just going to speak to these and say that there is a policy, as there is with the other grants, and these groups, in this case, the Arts and Heritage Advisory Board, are very stringent about examining these things against the policy and follow it rigidly to the T. The other thing, I just wanted to bring up Rogers Hometown Hockey. Again, it's coming on the weekend of March 3rd, 4th, 5th. And, this is a tremendous opportunity for our community. It may sound to some, if you don't pay attention, that maybe there's a hockey event going on. But this is much, much, much more than a hockey event. This is an entire community celebrating actually a festival of hockey and just a festival of events overall. And the site will be downtown. There will be all kinds of kickoff events and alumni games and games involving community members and police and fire. And then there's the hockey events themselves and so on. It's a whole entire weekend festival. And I don't want to go on too much more because the Rogers group themselves, who are working with us, tremendous to work with, will be doing a lot of their own public communications and letting everyone know what's going on. But I wanted to encourage the community to get out and see. It's a busy weekend, but there's something here from everyone, little kid to older kid. We're all kids at heart, I guess. And this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for us.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Pearson?
Thank you, Worship. And Councillor Friesen, there's another special event that's coming up that is funded by the cultural grants that I'd like to encourage all of our non-Indigenous folks to take part in, and that's Healing and Reconciliation Week, which is being funded by the cultural grants as a long series of grants that we've made to this event. It's really important, I think, for us to understand that this is one of the ways in which we encourage people to foster their understanding of our first residents and to gain some understanding of the culture that's there. It is essential to our understanding and appreciation of our residents, of our region's first residents. And please attend, not just because it's educational, not because it'll increase your understanding and appreciation for Indigenous culture, but because it's fun. The round dances and the kitchen party, the Métis kitchen parties, are just great fun. They're held at the Esplanade, and I encourage everyone to attend.
Good. Any other questions or comments? All right, if we could vote on this report. That was unanimous, thank you.
Our next report's on page 40, item 4.4, the Corporate Services Committee meeting of February the 14th. And this report's for adoption and information.
I move that report is indicated.
Thank you. Any comments? All right, if we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Moving on to item 4.5, on page 76, you'll find the Administrative Committee meeting minutes of February the 15th, and this is for adoption and information.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, if we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Moving along now to reports for reception. Item 5.1 on page 85, you'll find the Municipal Planning Commission meeting minutes of January the 25th.
I move this report for reception.
Second that report.
Any comments? Councillor Friesen?
If I could, Your Worship, through the chair to Councillor Varga, I just wanted to ask about item 4, which has to do with the Ranchland Subdivision Phase 3C. You had a couple of the members of the Planning Commission who were opposed, and it talks a little bit about it in the minutes, but I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more so I could understand this better. It promises to be an interesting area, but we've always talked around our table and in the community about big lots and small lots and all those kinds of things, so I'd be interested in the thinking of the Planning Commission in this one.
Well, there's a few things through the chair to Councillor Friesen. One was, of course, there's a couple gas wells that are on next to some of the residential that's coming, correct? And the other one was the size of the lots and how they're doing it and whether they're going to have some bigger size lots, and there was some bigger size lots that were going on. There's always a concern for parking on these streets once they're built also. And I think a few of the board members brought some of those concerns up at that time because they thought it was right to bring it up to planning, right, to see if anything could be done on those parts, right? So it was just general questions to see if we could get better at some of the things that we do within these subdivisions. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
but
I just...
There were concerns that seem to come up all the time in our municipal plannings. Size of the lots, parking, right? And this time it was the gas wells and how close the gas wells are going to be in proximity to the development.
Yeah, and if I could follow up, and thank you for that. I'm assuming the gas wells make the development quite a bit more challenged than usual. But if I think over time and look at some of the areas, not just in our community, by the way, this is in the larger cities as well, where the lots have not been as, very big, and so it means there's either garages in the back or no garages. You see the streets absolutely clogged with cars, which takes away from a sense of community, an ability to walk around, meet your neighbors, have your kids on the street, all those kinds of things that are really healthy for a neighborhood. And so that's why I'm asking, because it just made me think, are we wise in, I'm not saying we're being in a hurry to develop this, but do we need to take a step back and examine any other neighborhoods where we're going to clog the street with vehicles like that?
Well, if I might, that's a concern all the time in municipal planning in our commission that comes up is those things. They always bring up the concerns almost every time that it comes up because some of them are real estate people and they know the concerns of the people that are trying to buy these properties or buy these lots, and those are the main concerns that are here, that maybe we are doing it too fast, maybe there isn't enough consideration for building different size lots or different kinds of developments, and they always seem to bring the same concerns up. It's either the parking, the size of the lots, and I think those are the two major ones. So we asked for clarification or if something can be done towards that in the future before we actually bring it forward. And the response was, I think from planning, was that they can look into it and see if something can be done and go from there. But as far, it's our development, so you know what I mean, the developer is the city. So and I'm sure that the one that we approved for an extension last time, and that's in the south side, they're building some bigger lots now too, right? So they've got a variety of lots, but most of their lots are going to large size or larger size lots than the small lots, right? So, but those are the two concerns that come up every time in our municipal planning whenever it comes to a subdivision like this. So I don't know if I answered your question, but those concerns are brought up every time to planning. and planning answers us back with technical information, so.
And one more, if I could, I don't want this to turn into a twosome here, but I'm kind of concerned about it, and it is our development. This is here for information, there's nothing we can do about it. And for me, it's not about small versus big lots, because we need small lots. Young families need a chance to own a home. And not everyone can afford a big new home on a great big lot, and I certainly agree with that, but I just worry that we somehow find a way to get around some of those concerns we have so that we can develop healthier, I'll use the word health in a very wide way, broad way, healthier neighborhoods. So I won't belabor it anymore, but I would hope that Municipal Planning Commission can really help planning work towards finding some solutions to this.
And I don't know whether Commissioner Schwarzenberger or you might be able to help me out a little bit on some of this too.
Through the chair, I can try. When planning assesses a development plan like this, they have 2 points of reference, the land use bylaw and the municipal development plan. And the land use bylaw speaks specifically to the amount of parking that is required when you build a neighborhood. And if a plan meets that minimum requirement, there is no reason to oppose it. If council wishes different considerations for parking, we will have to amend that land use bylaw to reflect that, because that really is the overarching strategic document that guides development. The municipal development plan, of course, is coming up for review next year, and again, there's specific language in there talking about intensification as a desired outcome in our city to minimize the cost of growth. Again, if council wants to build in different strategic objectives into the way we plan and grow, it needs to be anchored in that strategic document, because that's where these outcomes fall under. Now, there are individuals on the Planning Commission who may or may not agree with the land use bylaw or with the municipal development plan, but those are the documents that are referenced and that staff's recommendations will be based on and adhere to.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none. That was unanimous, thank you.
Now we move on to bylaws for second and third readings.
So
Ask.
we'll ask when we go on third reading.
Well, I was wondering if there was an appetite to do them omnibus.
Oh, a second and third reading? Is there-
Your worship,
yeah.
if I may, I discussed this with the city clerk prior to the meeting. She will have to read in each of these bylaws. She can go through all of them, and then I will move second reading of all
Okay.
of them.
And then
And
we'll just-
then for the third reading, we would just reference the number.
Yes.
So if there's assent to that in a general sense, then I would suggest we proceed in that
Is there anyone
way.
opposed to that? All
I
right.
take it we've received no submissions on any of these, City Clerk?
No, we haven't. These particular ones do not require a public hearing, but they have been advertised.
They have been advertised. And if anyone wants to ask questions about any particular one, we can certainly take that out and do so
Yes.
on the second reading.
So I don't see any opposition, so please proceed.
Okay. So our first bylaw for second and third reading is item 6.1, page 93, bylaw 4401, bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $6,900,000 for the purpose of replacing sewer mains in 2017. Item 6.2, page 97, bylaw 4402, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $3,500,000 for the purpose of Briar Park Gravity Sewer Bypass, Phase 1, 2017. Item 6.3 on page 101, bylaw 4403, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $2,750,000 for the purpose of replacing downtown sewer mains in 2017. Item 6.4, page 105, bylaw 4404, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $3,500,000 for the purpose of rehabilitating the South Central Sanitary Trunk Sewer, Phase 1 in 2017. Item 6.5, page 109, Bylaw 4405, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $2 million for the purpose of replacing South Railway Street sewer mains. Item 6.6, page 113, Bylaw 4406, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $6,900,000 for the purpose of replacing sewer mains in the 2018 Asset Management Programme. Item 6.7, page 117, Bylaw 4407, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $3,300,000 for the purpose of Briar Park Gravity Sewer Bypass, Phase 1 in 2018. Item 6.8 on page 121, Bylaw 4408, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $1,500,000 for the purpose of upgrading the Briar Park Sewer Lift Station. Item 6.9, page 125, Bylaw 4409, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $1,500,000 for the purpose of Phase 2 of the South Central Sanitary Trunk Sewer. Next, we have item 6.10 on page 129, Bylaw 4410, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $1 million for the purpose of upgrading the Thompson Sewer Lift Station. Item 6.11, page 133, Bylaw 4411, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $1,500,000 for the purpose of wastewater treatment plant motor control replacement. Item 6.12, page 137, Bylaw 4412, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $500,000 for the purpose of wastewater treatment plant secondary backup generator replacement. Item 6.13, page 141, Bylaw 4413, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $900,000 for the purpose of rehabilitating the wastewater treatment plant trickling filters. Item 6.14, page 145, Bylaw 4414, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $6,900,000 for the purpose of replacing water mains in the 2017 Asset Management Programme. Item 6.15 on page 149, Bylaw 4415, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $1 million for the purpose of replacing South Railway water mains. Item 6.16 on page 153, Bylaw 4416, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $2,750,000 for the purpose of replacing downtown water mains. Item 6.17, page 157, Bylaw 4417, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $6,900,000 for the purpose of replacing water mains in the 2018 Asset Management Programme. Item number 6.18, page 161, Bylaw 4418, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $800,000 for the purpose of Oxford Avenue Southwest water valve chamber upgrades. And item 6.19 on page 165, Bylaw 4419, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $4,600,000 for the purpose of the 2018 Water Distribution Mains Extension Programme.
Your Worship, I move second reading of all of those bylaws.
And I will second that.
Any, Councillor Pearson?
Thank you, Worship. You know, it would be very easy for our residents to look at this $57,800,000 bylaw package and say, look at how easily those people can spend the money. But it needs to be said, and it needs to be said very clearly, that the city is absolutely a pioneer in replacing the underground structure in our city. The infrastructure needs to be replaced, and we have committed ourselves to spending $1 billion over 30 years. This is just part of that package. And I think people need to understand that two of the most essential services that we provide in the city is the provision of safe water and sewer. It's something that's critical to us. I hope it's safe to assume, too, that when we dig up the streets for water and sewer mains, we're replacing both at the same time. And so to our CAO, I understand that water and sewer are two different city utilities, and that means that bylaws must be passed separately for each of these improvements. For water, that's one kind of bylaw, sewer is another. But can you help me by matching some of these bylaws, not all of them, some bylaws, water with sewer, so we can identify which project is being funded by which bylaw? It seems to me it's important for us to understand when we dig up the street, they're both water and sewer, they're going in the ground. And I thought at one point, when I looked at these bylaws, that, for example, that it meant that bylaws for water, $6,900,000, sewer, $6,900,000, I thought they were equal. And so why didn't we just say $13.9 million for a street project? But that isn't the case, because some of these pipes are more expensive than others, and so it's not a perfect match. Maybe you can help us understand that particular problem.
Through the chair to Councillor Pearson. I guess just looking quickly at the numbers here, bylaw 4401 is the general sewer mains replacement program for 2017 for 6.9 million. It would be matched by 4414, which is the water main replacement program for 2017, and it's exactly the same amount of money. So that's an indication that it's the same, meters or kilometers or whatever of pipe that's being replaced, and it's one project, and the costs are simply divided between the two. You have the same with the South Railway projects for 405 for sewer and for 415 for water. In that case, the sewer is more expensive, it's 2 million, yes, and the water is 1, so there's probably some additional sewer infrastructure that's being dealt with in that case. So it simply depends on, it's one project, but they will divvy up the cost depending on the amount of infrastructure pertaining to each utility.
And through the chair, CEO, can you confirm that the cost of digging up the street is something that is shared between the two utilities? The costs are shared for that particular part of the project, and probably for filling in the hole and paving the streets afterwards.
Through the chair, yes.
Councillor Cox?
Well, first of all, a question to the CAO. The note to the debenture bylaws references that as at December 31st, 304 million, a few decimal places there, or 45% of the debt limit is outstanding, but there are approved borrowing bylaws in the amount of 123.5 million that have not been drawn. Is the 123.5 included in the 304? Or is that above the 304?
That would be above. That's the difference between the 45% of the borrowing limit and the 66 or something like that, if you include all of those borrowing bylaws that have not been fully borrowed. Now, some of them won't be borrowed against, such as the generation, where we saw the project is presumably coming in 10 or more than 10 million below what had been estimated, so we're not going to borrow those last 10 million, even though we have a borrowing bylaw saying we can borrow up to 66 million. There's also some that we know are projects that have potentially found other funding sources, we've found grants and so on, so we're not going to borrow everything that we have a borrowing bylaw outstanding for.
I appreciate that, but it was my understanding that the debt limit was a reflection of the borrowing bylaws and not the amount of money that we necessarily drew down. So do I stand corrected on that?
Yeah.
Because we're adding, with all of these combined, we're adding about $57 million, and we're increasing the percentage of our debt limit to 63.7% from the current 45%. So my question is the amount of $123.5 million that has not been drawn reflected in the 45%, or is it reflected in the 63.7%.
It's in the 63.7%. It's not in the 45%.
In any event, just to reassure the citizens of Medicine Hat, this is important work. It is, I don't know if we're pioneering, but quite as Councillor Pearson alluded, but we are certainly in the forefront of leading our infrastructure renewal program. We have the resources to do so. It is not for the faint of heart, but certainly I think it's necessary and worthwhile and well within our capacity. And I should point out as well, so that there's clarification on that, this is supported by our utility units and the rates which we charge for all of those utilities, and is not collected through taxes. So that may be small consolation. It's coming out of, in many cases, as I said earlier, the same pocket, but these are standalone units that have their own business plans, that actually return, or we attempt to return, a modest dividend to the city from each and every one of them. So they're run as business units with good business principles applied, and any businessman will tell you that debt is a necessary part of that whole process.
Thank you, Councillor Friesen.
Well, Councillor Cox said it well, thank you. I wanted to, this is a tremendous amount of money, and it's very easy to just vote in favor because we know we have to do it, and something needs to be said about it, though, and it's been said very well. We are so fortunate to live in a community where we are able to take care of our infrastructure in the ground. You know, it ages and it deteriorates over time at varying rates, and there are so many communities today that have not been able to do what's necessary to maintain their infrastructure and are in absolutely untenable positions where they will never, ever catch up. And we're not able to do this at the rate we would like to do it, but at least in Medicine Hat, we have had the courage to say we're going to do this over an expanded period of time, but we're going to do it, and we're going to take care of our infrastructure in the ground so that we'll never be in that position where our community is kind of crumbling beneath us, and we simply cannot ever, ever afford to catch up. So we have to do this. I just don't want anyone to think that it's done lightly, though. I mean, and this isn't a joke, and I don't mean to be glib, but I always used to say to my husband, you know, we can spend 4 hours talking about dog poop and 4 seconds okaying $50 million for a turbine, and it's so true, you know. You can have a lot of conversation about something that's small, very little about something that's large. But that doesn't mean that something that's large is unimportant or that we don't need to do it. So I think, I know it's a lot of money, it just makes me cringe, but I feel so fortunate we live in Medicine Hat.
Thank you. Councillor Dumanowski.
Yeah, I'll just add to perhaps what has already been said. I think Councillor Cox said it well. Most of this debt that we're talking about here is utility side. And every election, it becomes a conversation piece around how much do we owe, et cetera, what is our debt servicing. But typically 85, 90+% of that debt is utility side, not tax side. So we are doing very well tax side, and we're actually doing well utility side. And it used to be said, probably more so when times were a little bit more robust, that any utility or generator had to have and ought to have had a certain amount of debt in order to be perceived and, quite frankly, in the business. You cannot run a utility without being in debt, and yet that debt servicing is borne by the utility side, not the tax side. So I think that was deserving of more attention. And just to, when I look at some of these bylaws, you've said it well, we have $57, $58 million worth of bylaws. We're looking at asset management program reduction. We're trying to reduce the burden of our crumbling or compromised utilities. And what I like about this, and it wasn't to my liking, but I understand it better now, and I've shared this many times since, it's not just replacing one area or the oldest stuff. In some cases, the oldest utility underground is still working fine. It may be fine for 50 more years, but it's looking at all the utilities in the city and picking out the areas that are that are problematic and are compromised. We've all seen the stories where we had people in Medicine Hat who had brown water coming through their taps. We can't allow that to continue, although it's safe. Those are areas that we have to be more aggressive in, and I could give you 100 different scenarios. So I really like the asset management plan. It really is targeted and very purposeful, and we're using money where it needs to be spent first and foremost. And also in many cases here, we're drawing for 2017, we're drawing for 2018. And one last observation, South Railway, for example, some of that money will come back in the form of grants from the province. So we have to spend it, but we'll get it back. So there are a lot of idiosyncrasies here that we have to consider when we're looking at this. So it is a huge draw, but in the end, most of it is utility side, and some of it will be paid back through grants and other means. So I think this demonstrates our resolve to do things as prudently as possible, so I support them.
Thank you, Councillor Varga.
Your worship, I guess I look at it a little different also, that we're creating to the economy where we're actually spending $57 million, and some of our businesses are going to get lucky enough to participate in some of that work. So we are spending a lot of money, and some of our clients will be benefiting from this down the road, I'm hoping, by the work that they have to do. And there's a lot of areas that we're going to cover in the next 2 years. So I'm looking at it as a bonus for us, stimulating maybe some of the economy with the work that's going to be out there, and hopefully some of our not developers, but our contractors in town have the opportunity to get some of this work. So I think it's a win situation. We're spending money. Some of the money might stay within our community. We're upgrading everything. I think it's a good news story there also. It is a lot of money, but hopefully a lot of that money stays within our community and is respent again down the road.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, if we could vote on second reading. That was unanimous, thank you.
So for third reading, we could, now I've read the bylaws into the record, we could do omnibus on them on their short titles, which it would be their bylaw number.
Please proceed.
Okay, so we'd need a motion for third reading for bylaws 4401 through to 4419.
So move.
Any questions or comments on third reading? All right, if we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Moving along now to new bylaws. The first one for first reading is item 7.1 on page 169. Bylaw 4421, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to close roads in the City of Medicine Hat.
Your worship, I seek leave to introduce bylaw 4421 and ask that it be read a first time.
Second.
If we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Our next bylaw is item 7.2 on page 171. You'll find bylaw 4422, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to establish a heritage savings reserve.
And we can go for all three on this one if so desired.
Okay, your worship, I seek leave to introduce bylaw 4422, and ask that it be read a first time.
I'll second that.
If we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
I'd ask that bylaw 4422 be read a second time.
Any questions?
Second.
Oh, sorry, any questions or comments? Councillor Friesen?
Well, I can't let this go by without recognizing it. For years, we've talked about a heritage savings fund, a heritage trust fund of Medicine Hat, which will be called our Heritage Savings Reserve. And, I think this is really important. This will become an endowment fund, and this is the beginning. This is the inaugural motion, and I think it's pretty exciting. We're not taking $1 million from the taxpayers here, out of tax money, tax-supported operating money. This will come from the Community Capital Reserve and be the first installment, I hope, of many to come through the years to make our community more sustainable from a financial standpoint. So I just, I'm hoping we'll all support it happily, but I thought it needed to be mentioned because this is pretty exciting.
Good points, thank you. Any other questions or comments on second reading? All right, if we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Your worship, I seek leave of council to ask for unanimous consent for bylaw 4422.
If we could vote on unanimous consent. Oh, yeah, thank you. If we could vote. That was unanimous, go ahead.
Finally, I'd ask that bylaw 4422 be read a third time and passed.
Second that.
Any questions or comments on third reading? I don't know. Okay, if we could vote. And that was unanimous, thank you.
Our next bylaw is item 7.3 on page 174. Bylaw 4427, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $5,500,000 for the purpose of the 2017 electric distribution building renovation.
Your worship, I would seek leave to introduce bylaw 4427 and move that it be read a first time.
Second.
If we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
And our last bylaw is item 7.4 on page 178. Bylaw 4428, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to incur indebtedness in the amount of $1,191,000 for the purpose of IT security upgrades.
I'd ask that bylaw 4428 be read a first time.
Second that.
Okay, if we could vote. And that was unanimous, thank you.
I received no notice of motion.
Seeing no more business before this council, we're adjourned.